Hi everyone, and welcome to another video. In this series, I want to take you through my process for writing for orchestra. There are many effective ways to compose orchestral music, and I'm not about to tell you that my process is better than any other process, but I thought it might be interesting for you to see a step-by-step breakdown of my methods from start to finish. So in this video, I'll begin that process by exploring the first steps that I take. And I'm going to divide these first steps into three parts: defining the purpose and scope of your piece, generating the ideas, and then cataloging those ideas. So we'll start by defining our purpose for writing this piece. It could be that we're commissioned or hired to write for the orchestra. It could be that we need to score a film or a video game or something along those lines. Or it could be that we're working on our craft and need to build up a portfolio. It doesn't really matter the reason, only that you understand why you're doing it, because that can influence the function and the scope of the work. So you may need to write a specific style of music. You might have to stick to a specific length. You might be writing for the concert hall or perhaps as underscore. All of these things are important to consider even before we think about notes and rhythms. Let's say for this piece, I'm writing a standalone orchestral work. So not underscore, not background music. I want to write a 5-minute work, or at least I'll aim for 5 minutes. That will establish a certain set of parameters, and it would be different than, let's say, a 30-second cue, or a 2-minute piece, or a 10-minute piece, or a 30-minute piece, for instance. From experience, I know roughly how much material I need to generate for 5 minutes of music, so I can go into the next stage of the process a bit more informed. If you have a very specific purpose for writing the work, you might be restricted in musical style. Perhaps you have to write an action cue, or perhaps you're writing a theme for a specific character or idea. In which case that can and should influence your musical style. In my case, I'm not writing for a film or anything, so I'm not basing this on anything. I could certainly look elsewhere for inspiration, like art or poetry. I've known a lot of composers who base their orchestral music on landscapes or things very personal to them. I've even had students who used AI-generated art as inspiration. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it can inspire you. Okay, on to the next step in the process, generating material. Once again, this is my process, not the only process, so you may work very differently from me. I have Cubase open here and a piano VST that I like. This is Simple Sam Signature Grand. Doesn't really matter what piano VST or what instrument even you're using, as long as you're comfortable with it and you can be inspired by it, which is the case here. And actually this sample library is very affordable. I really recommend it. I'm using good headphones because I really want to be inspired by the sound of this piano. And cheap earbuds or anything like that doesn't really do it justice. In an ideal world, I'd be playing on a grand piano and recording myself. That's not really realistic right now. So I'm starting in the DAW, and I like it because I'm not bogged down by musical notation things like tempo, meter, bar lines, all of that. So I turn off the metronome, I hit record, and then I just start improvising. I've worked out some ideas for this piece over the last few days, and sometimes letting things percolate in your brain for a few days can be really helpful. And don't rush it. It could take weeks even before you really get some good material. When I wrote a 70-minute opera in graduate school, for instance, I was generating ideas for like a few months. So for this 5-minute piece, it should just be a few hours spread over a couple days. So I'm an okay piano player, not an amazing one by any stretch, but I have a lot of experience improvising. And this process is really just about working out the ideas in your brain and translating them to actual notes and rhythms. And during that process, my ear will make split-second decisions, and unexpected things will definitely happen, including errors. And if you follow this process, no matter how good or bad of a piano player you are, you're going to make some errors, and I strongly urge you to not stop the record. Just play through the errors instead of starting and stopping and starting over again. Because as soon as you do that, you're creating an environment where you think you have to be perfect, and that can really be detrimental. So just hit record, forget about that, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start this session, record a bit, and it's going to last a while, so I'm going to edit and trim that down and show just some highlights. All right, here we go. Okay, so I just finished a recording session that took about a half an hour. At some point you want to take a break. Just stop, save your work, maybe do a few of these recording sessions over the course of a day or a few days. But at some point you'll have more than enough material generated for your piece. And at that point, you'll have to do step 3 in the process, which is cataloging these ideas. I use Dorico for this process, and somehow I have to transcribe all that I've done here and get my ideas from Cubase into Dorico, because that's where I'll actually be composing the piece. Dorico is really great for this because you can have multiple flows within the same file, and I like to separate out my ideas that way. The trickiest part is going through this, all that I've just recorded, and sorting through what I want to keep and what I can discard. I recommend saving a copy of this before you do any deleting, just so you can go back and reference it later, because maybe you mistakenly deleted something or you edited something here and you want to go back to the original recording. So I tend to transcribe more than enough material for this piece because at some point when composing, things will take a different direction, and I might end up using material that I didn't think would initially fit, and I might also end up archiving stuff for later composition. I transcribe by ear because I think that's a really important skill to develop, but if you struggle with that, you might consider exporting MIDI from Cubase, although because I turned off the metronome, that will be a little bit rough. You could try cleaning the MIDI up in Cubase, or maybe even converting this track to audio and then matching it to a meter and tempo. That's a difficult process, but certainly possible. Let me try that with one of these ideas here. What you could do, save this of course before you do any editing, but I'm just going to take that chunk, just for the sake of this video, take this chunk and convert this to audio actually. So you can do that in Cubase, render in place. It'll create a separate audio track of that material that you just spliced together. So I have that here. Okay, so for this demonstration, now that I have this as audio, it's time to transcribe this material. And to do that, I like to create both a tempo track and a time signature track. You could also do like a chord track or anything that might help you figure out what's happening in the music. I'm going to drag these up here and zoom in, find that first transient, which is right here, and align that with some measure, in this case just arbitrarily 353. All right, so listen to this without the metronome on and figure out what the meter is, at least initially. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5. So some kind of 5 for sure. And that's what I'll do. I'll pencil in 5 8. Could be 5 4, but I'm going to choose 5 8. And make sure this is aligned. And then find the time warp function in Cubase and punch in these measures basically. So I'm dragging the measures from Cubase's template or grid and aligning them with the transients, which I know begin new measures. So I'll keep doing that for a little bit here. Let's make sure I'm on the right track here, turning on metronome. Yeah, so you can hear the tempo is fluctuating quite a bit. That's okay. This is just so we can more easily transcribe things. Okay, so it's finally time to notate these ideas into Dorico. I have open a blank project with just one flow and one instrument. It's a grand staff. If at any point I need more than 2 staves, I'll just go in here, right-click, and add staff above or below. I can also add new flows for every idea that I have and I want separated. I can label these maybe based on the function in my piece. If I know that already, probably don't. Maybe it's a harmonic idea, maybe it's a rhythmic idea or a melodic idea. I can rearrange these, I can duplicate them. All of these are very useful tools in Dorico that help me prepare my composition process and get me started. And Dorico is a very useful tool, as is Cubase for that. So instead of showing you my transcription process, because that would take many, many hours, far too long for a video, here's just a little bit of that work that I've already done, some ideas that I've notated in Dorico, and you can tell some of these are really short, just 2 measures, basically just enough information here to remind me what the idea was so that I can use it to compose. eventually, in the next video, probably, I'll start actually putting these ideas together and talking about orchestral form, sort of harmonic form, melodic form, all of that, my process for writing a piece for orchestra. So I hope this video has been helpful. Stay tuned for the next one. I'm not sure when, but maybe in a few weeks. And I'm excited to start this process of writing a piece for orchestra. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.